Good morning, everyone. This is Nicole. I had a discussion on Gab Talk Media's channel the other day. The Grinch God, he was there. We had a lot of other people on the channel. But I wanted to focus on one thing that Grinch was talking about from the book called Daughters of the Trade, which discusses marriage that occurred on the Gold Coast between African women and white merchants, mostly of Dutch descent. If you go to Google, you will find, if you type in slave narratives, you will find these slave narratives. This document is not that long, but it's illustrated. And as you can see, this is Slave Narratives, a folk history of slavery in the U.S. from interviews with former slaves. Typewritten records prepared by the Federal Writers Project from 1936 to 1938, assembled by the Library of Congress Project, Work Projects Administration for the District of Columbia, sponsored by the Library of Congress. They have it illustrated with photographs. Copyright is from Washington, 1941. Volume 14, South Carolina Narratives, Part 2. They talk about, this is coming from the state of South Carolina. I put a link in Gab's chat room that you can go to as well. That document was published in 1974. But they have a list of all of the, they call them informants. I don't really like that term, but these were the participants, that's a better term, for the people who were slaves and how they experienced slavery during their lives. We have to remember a lot of people who experienced slavery were still alive in the 20s and 30s. And what I suggest you do, you don't have to read all of these clearly, but if you go through and search certain words, let's see, like if we search babies, that word will come up a lot. So let's just go here. This is from a slave, and what they did was record them giving their accounts and then publish it. So they talk about yearling children and the babies. And there's one lady, I think Annie Ruth Davis. This is from Marion, South Carolina, which is the lower part of the state. I think near Florence and Myrtle Beach area, where there was a lot of plantations there. And you have to remember, throughout the South, plantations had a certain set of rules and protocols they followed, but sometimes on each plantation things were different based on the type of crop and also based on the ratio of men and women they had there. So Miss Davis, Annie Ruth Davis, her work is pretty long. At the time they took her information, let's see. Oh, it's prepared by Annie Ruth Davis, from Marion, South Carolina. Mom Ryer Emanuel is the actual slave. She was an ex-slave. At the time, she was 78 years old. So the first sentence, it's like letting you know the mentality of people who were slaves. She says, "Oh, my Lord, child, I ain't know nothing about slavery time, no more than when we was just little kids living there on the white people plantation." So living on the plantation was like everyday life. It was just so natural to them. An unnatural, immoral situation and construct that was just like, okay, everybody deals with this, like whatever. And she said she was just a yearling child then, about 6 years old in slavery time. So now she thinks, she about 80 some odds, but she can never seem to get them odds together. So she really doesn't know how old she is. So then she says, I was a big little girl staying in an old master yard in them days, but I wasn't big enough to do nothing in the house no time. My old master been Anthony Ross, and he had set my age down in the Bible. So that goes back to what I've heard a few people say. They would write your name in the Bible. They put your name and the age and everything when you were born in the Bible. And she talks about a lot of the breeding. If you type in the word women and try to go to that word, yeah, they say yes. They would carry us there when the women would be going to work. Guan means going to work. Be there for sunrise. Would give us 3 meals a day because the old woman always give us supper for us. Mammy come out to field that evening. Them bigger ones, they would give them clabber and boiled peas and collards sometimes. Would give the little babies boiled pea soup and gruel in suck bottle. Yes, ma'am. The old woman had to mind all the yearling children and the babies too. That all her business was. So you had women, all their business was, the older women was to take care of the babies while the mothers go out and work in the fields. But there's certain fields the women couldn't work in. Certain fields you couldn't work in because you had to be so close. A lot of times you had to be close to the house, right? Because you had to come back in to deal with the baby sometimes. My grandma talked about how her grandmother and her mother, when they had children, sometimes my grandmother was a sharecropper. 5 years old, she had to start. They had to fit her for a bag, a burlap sack at 5, because at 5 years old, they have to have the adjustable burlap sacks for the children because their waist is smaller than an adult. So 5 years old, she out there picking cotton. At the end of the day, she has to go and weigh it. It has to be weighed. The children had a weigh line. The adults had a weigh line. And my grandmother talked about how, because she has younger siblings, but her mother had just given birth, and she couldn't make it back. There were times that she couldn't make it back to the house, where a lot of the children were being, taken care of. And this is sharecropping. This is not like antebellum slavery, but it's just a half a step away from slavery. But she had to she couldn't make it back to the house, and her breasts were full of milk, and it hurts when it's full of milk, and she had to just release the milk there on the ground because she couldn't make it back to the house in time. So that's the type of stuff women had to deal with. My grandmother told me how she couldn't go to the tobacco fields a couple of farms over. At that time they called them farms. They didn't call them plantations anymore. But all of this goes to how women were treated, and this is translated from Daughters of the Trade. A lot of this stuff is translated. White was seen as superior, and Grinch was right. A lot of the stuff that they talk about with white is seen as superior, black is seen as inferior, a lot of it started there with Daughters of the Trade on the Gold Coast. So they talk here, always would inflict a punishment at sunrise in the morning before they would go to work. So if you did something the night before, you get punished before you go to work at sunrise. Then the women, they would force them to drop their body frock across their shoulders so they could get to the naked skin, and would have a strap to whip them with. Would never use no board on the women. So that's showing you that they treated the women differently than they treated the men, especially the women that were working and the women that were breeders. Oh, they would have a lot scattered about full of them what was to get whipped on a morning. So the women would have to pull their dresses down across their shoulders, sometimes breasts exposed, and get whipped on the front or the back. If they had children, my grandmother said they probably wouldn't whip them on the front. They whip them on the back. But it shows you how women were treated a little differently than men. My grandma talked about how, she'd be running through the woods with her sisters, brothers, and stuff, and you see a man hanging. And she's like, that was traumatizing. But she said it became so common that this was because she's, born in 1927. So this is like the, early 30s, going into the 40s even. Walking to school, walking to the store, where you have to have some type of pass, because you don't have an ID at that time. You got to have like some kind of pass. And this is during the 30s, 30s and 40s. So I would say I'm going to leave a link for you all to go to this particular PDF. I'll also leave a link for Daughters of the Trade. It seems like a real interesting book. I want to get into that. Shout out to Gab, everybody that was on the panel the other night. I know there was a lot that was discussed that night, but I wanted to focus on one point here in this video. I also wanted to leave a link to Gab's video so you can go to that and see what I'm talking about. If you're new to my channel, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell 2 times so you'll know when I post new videos and go live. I'll holler at y'all in the next video. Y'all have a great day. Friday's almost here. Everybody who's already subscribed, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'll holler at y'all later. Peace.